Hi, this is Patrick Henry, the CEO of QuestFusion with the Real Deal What Matters Live. This is our first episode, episode 1 of our new show, and we're super excited about it. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. You never know what's going to happen when you go live, but we're going to try to provide the best information and insights to the entrepreneurial community out there and all of you startup CEOs. As many of you know, prior to forming QuestFusion, I ran a company called Entropic Communications for about 11 years. Entropic developed the enabling technology for multi-room DVR and a number of other kind of key innovations within the home entertainment space. Today I'm going to share with you a story about one of the most significant days in my life as the CEO of Entropic. It was December 6, 2007, the final day of Entropic's IPO roadshow. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. The sun was setting and snow flurries were beginning to fall in New York City. Over the last 2.5 weeks, my CFO and I had been coast to coast twice and visited Europe, meeting with prospective investors. And now we're being chauffeured into New York City in this big black Cadillac Escalade. As a CEO of a company that was about to go public, I should have been ecstatic, but instead I had a knot in my stomach. See, earlier that afternoon, our lead bankers from Credit Suisse and Lehman Brothers informed us that Entropic had a failed IPO and we would not be able to go public. They advised me and Dave, my CFO, to go home, lick our wounds, and try to enjoy the holidays. See, about a month and a half before we started the roadshow, news first broke of the collapse of the subprime mortgage-backed securities market. And by the time we hit the road, fear, doom, and gloom had captured most of the interest of the portfolio managers of even the largest and most highly respected hedge funds and mutual funds on Wall Street, the firms that were going to be our largest shareholders in the IPO. Our bankers felt like we could maybe take another crack at the public markets, maybe 6 to 9 months down the road. By then, the subprime meltdown will have blown over. But we needed the cash from the IPO to continue to execute on our growth plans. Today, I'm going to share with you how we turned this catastrophe of a failed IPO into a miraculous success story for Entropic and our investors by taking the company public the following day. And I'm going to share with you the process we use to help us successfully navigate through one of the most difficult and challenging 24-hour periods of my professional career and how you can do this too. Have you ever been working towards a really important outcome and it fell through? Or have you ever lost a big customer or a big business deal? Well, I don't know about you, but I sure have. And sometimes when that happens to me, it makes me feel like a total loser. And if you ever read the Yahoo chat boards about me during my tenure as a public company CEO, you'd find out that there were times when that feeling was widespread, especially since people could be anonymous. As business leaders, we can't let these setbacks shut us down. As a CEO, you need to make decisions, sometimes hard decisions, even in an environment of uncertainty, ambiguity, and sometimes even anxiety, like I had during this failed IPO period. It's in times like this that you might get conflicting advice and opinions from your team and your board and your advisors. And you'll need to consider the ramifications to all your key stakeholders and set a course of action that you think is best for the company. All of us know how difficult it is to grow and build a successful business. We've all heard the statistics. 7 out of 10 new startups fail. And the odds are actually a little worse for venture-backed startups where 75% fail. What most entrepreneurs don't realize is that only about 200 companies out of roughly 500,000 new employer-based firms founded in the US each year reach $100 million in annual revenue. That's only 0.04%, not 25% or 30%. Just think about that for a minute. That's less than 1%. In fact, that's less than 0.1%. VCs are trying to find the 200 companies per year in that exclusive club because that's how they make money and stay in business. Entropic was one of those companies. But it wasn't some linear path to success. It wasn't some rosy up and to the right success story. There were a lot of ups and downs, and even times of tremendous skepticism about Entropic making it at all, much less making it big. So how do you become part of that club? The one in 2,500 companies that's truly successful in terms of return on investment and wealth creation. Isn't that what we all want? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about my experience, decades of experience being a serial entrepreneur and navigating through very difficult challenges and experiencing painful failures. And based on that experience, I've developed a 3-step process that will dramatically improve your chances of business success and revolutionize the way you make decisions as a business leader. And it's called Plan, Commit, Win. Let's start with the plan. I know many of you have seen business plans, and probably most of you have written 1 or 2 business plans yourself. I know I've written a few. I call these promotional plans because they're used to raise money and solicit investors. And that's very different than a real game plan for your business. A real plan digs in deep and honestly asks and answers very difficult questions about your market landscape and how you make money. I joined Entropic in 2003, before the company had a product to sell and before we had any revenue. It was my 3rd startup CEO job. The company had some of the most talented engineers in the world, bright and innovative minds, and a vision of how our product was going to transform the world. What we didn't have when I joined the company was a detailed game plan for turning that vision into reality. Sure, we had a plan for raising money, business plan for raising money, but that's very different than a plan of action, a roadmap that everyone can follow, where you can measure your results and test and refine that plan based on customer engagement. So we went through a thorough strategic planning process and developed an annual operating plan and budget based on that. We looked at scenarios and potential outcomes and implemented the plan. But what exactly is a thorough strategic planning process? Well, let's take a look at an analogy. If you're going on a multi-day hike in the woods, you probably should have a plan. You might want to look at a topographical map and maybe a weather forecast. Will it be colder at night or at higher elevations? Where are you starting and where do you want to end up? What provisions do you need in terms of food, water, and shelter to successfully get from your point A to your point B safe and healthy? In business, the map is about your market, your customers, the competitive landscape, and how your people, products, and solutions stack up in that environment. Where you want to go is measured by your key milestones. Key milestones can include things like revenue, product development progress, customer traction, and other key financial and non-financial metrics that are important to gauging the progress of your business. Then you'll need to plan your provisions in terms of people, capital, and cash to successfully traverse from your point A to your point B. Sounds simple, right? Too simple, and we all know that. In business, the map is constantly changing. As business leaders, we need to learn to monitor those changes and adjust to those changes appropriately. And that gets us to the second part of Plan, Commit, Win, the commit part. Commitment in this context is really about keeping the key strategic objectives in mind as you deal with the tactical challenges of the journey. This is where many startups end up in what I call the startup graveyard or the trash heap. These are difficult and challenging times that you have to deal with. So this is where there's three elements of commit in this context. The first is about focus. The level of focus is what differentiates mediocre from good and good from great. Some people call it discipline, some call it grinding, some call it grit. It's about doing what's right instead of doing what's easy. It's about doing the difficult things day in and day out, grinding things out despite adversity or an apparent lack of progress, and sometimes even boredom. I think the level of focus is one of the most significant things that differentiates between success and failure in business, and for that matter, many other aspects of life. That gets us to the second part of commit in this context. It's about dealing with adversity and adapting to those kinds of situations. And in Tropic, we're constantly faced with difficult situations like lost designs, customer deployment problems, angry and frustrated customers, upset investors, and fierce competition. On the day of December 6, 2007, there was only one person on this planet that felt we could take Entropic public the following day, and that was me. You need to continue to believe in yourself and in what you're doing, even when others do not. At Entropic, no one believed that our technology would become the de facto standard for home networking of digital entertainment. Yet today, it's deployed in over 60 million homes in the US and millions of other homes throughout the world. Entropic had a vision, a plan, some key goals, and a commitment to win. That gets us to the third part of commit in this context. It's about having a great mentor. A great mentor can be the difference between success and failure, because being a CEO is a lonely and difficult job. You can't really tell everything to your board or to your team because you don't really have peers as a CEO. A great mentor can help fill that gap. I'll give you an example. About 15 years ago, I went helicopter skiing in the Bugaboos in British Columbia, Canada. I was an advanced snow skier prior to signing up for the trip, so I felt pretty comfortable about it. On the first day of skiing, a helicopter took us up the mountain and landed in this little clearing in the woods. I thought to myself, this isn't all like the trip brochures that showed delighted skiers gliding down beautiful powder-covered glaciers with no obstacles. My helicopter dropped us in the forest. As it turns out, over half the skiing at Canadian mountain helicopter resorts is what's called subalpine skiing, which basically means you are skiing in the forest, which is basically you have gigantic trees in front of you and on both sides of you with these massive 30-foot deep trenches around them called tree wells. You definitely don't want to fall in a tree well. I thought to myself, are you kidding me? The Entropic IPO was kind of like this. I thought I was going to be doing all this amazing open terrain skiing, but instead I was dropped in the forest of the subprime meltdown. Heli-skiing, like running a company, is very technically challenging, and that assumes the conditions aren't changing day to day and week to week, which of course is ridiculous because the weather changes. In business, there's constantly ongoing changes as well, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic. And you need to constantly monitor the market landscape and adjust accordingly. At Canadian Mountain Helicopter Resorts, they have expert guides that help you navigate down the mountain. My heli-skiing guide kept me safe and probably kept me alive. And that's getting to the adapting part and the mentorship part of running a company. Like all great athletes have coaches, nearly all great CEOs have mentors. Let's take a look at a couple of really notable examples. When Google hired Eric Schmidt as its CEO, he had Bill Campbell, retained Bill Campbell, the former chairman of Intuit, as a mentor. Steve Jobs had various different mentors during different stages of his career, including Robert Friedland, the founder of Ivanhoe Mines, and Bob Noyce from Intel. It's amazing to me that so many CEOs think they don't need a mentor when the right mentor can help you navigate more quickly through the most difficult challenges and obstacles of running and building a business. If you don't yet have a mentor, I think you should definitely find one. So that gets me to the kind of practical application of Plan, Commit, Win. You know, the win part of Plan, Commit, Win deals with how do you improve your winning percentages and how do you win in business. We've all had our share of wins and our share of failures and problems in business. But how do you win consistently? Well, first, you can't win if you don't finish. So that means that you need to keep playing the game, sometimes even in the face of dire circumstances. You can't win if you quit. That's why I'm not a huge fan of failing fast and the glamorization of failure in today's startup environment. Of course, we're all going to experience failures and we're all going to experience setbacks, but that's different than giving up. If you're always quitting, you're always starting, and you may miss the best learning opportunities of going through the most challenging and difficult times. And you definitely eliminate your chances of winning in that situation. But winning in business is more than just finishing. In business, you need to constantly enlist the support of others. Startups and companies, building companies, after all, are a team sport. So that means under a variety of circumstances, you need to convince your team, your board, your investors, that your course of action is right for the company. And this is really about selling your ideas. When you're selling your ideas, it's important to understand what's in it for them. You know, your audience, what makes them tick? What are their problems? What are their struggles? And then sell your ideas in the proper context to achieve your desired result. Getting back to the Entropic failed IPO and how we implemented these principles in that situation. In most situations, when you run into a period of difficulty, sometimes people tell you that there's only two alternatives. Do this or don't do this. Take the company public under the current plan, or go home and lick your wounds and try to enjoy the holidays. In reality, there's an infinite number of solutions to most problems in most situations, but we typically say, why do I have to be at either 0 degrees or 180 degrees? Maybe I want to be at 90 degrees. In the case of the Entropic IPO, we're marketing our deal with 10 million shares for sale to the public market at a price target of $9 to $11 per share. In the summer of 2007, when we were contemplating the IPO, that plan seemed really reasonable. But the world had changed. It was now early December 2007, and in every investor meeting, the portfolio managers were hiding under their desks. We need to drag them out from underneath their desks to hear our presentation. Then they would crawl back under their desks after the meeting, figuratively, of course. Here's what we did that made the big difference in dealing with the failed IPO. We had implemented the principles of Plan, Commit, Win at Entropic before the IPO roadshow. It's like the old question, when did Noah build the ark? Before the rain. Because we'd implemented Plan, Commit, Win, we had an excellent map of what we needed to continue to be successful. We needed to raise at least $30 million in the IPO to continue to execute on our growth plans. Sure, it would have been nice to have north of $100 million of cash on the balance sheet, and that would have given us more flexibility to do acquisitions, but that level of cash was not necessary to continue to grow the company organically. Now, the really important part. We asked our bankers a lot of questions about the specifics they were hearing from prospective investors. Were they interested in investing at any level? You know, what were their specific problems with our deal? My CFO called the second tier of bankers that were marketing our IPO to find out what they were hearing. As it turned out, there was potential interest in our deal at $6 to $8 per share from a smaller group of investors where each investor would hold a larger stake in Entropic. So we hopped on a call with our board of directors and made a recommendation that we cut the number of shares in the IPO from 10 million to 8 million shares. And we market our deal in the lower price range. After a lot of discussion, our board approved this plan. Then we hopped on a call with our reluctant bankers, and after lots of pushback and discussion, one of the more experienced and highly respected bankers on the phone said, let's do this. We're going to get this deal done. The following day, which was December 7th, 2007, which ironically is Pearl Harbor Day, we were at the Credit Suisse office in New York City on the top floor in a big conference room, smiling and dialing for dollars. Federated Kaufman came in. Fidelity came in. The ball was rolling. We priced the IPO that afternoon, and fortunately for Entropic, it was not a day that will live in infamy. We had successfully done it. We had taken the company public. We raised about $48 million in our IPO, which was very fortunate for us because a week later, the IPO window closed for the next 2 years. That cash allowed us to survive during the Great Recession. Many other companies did not survive, including one of our lead bankers, Lehman Brothers. So what's the lesson with all this as a company CEO or as an entrepreneur? To run and grow a successful business, you need to have passion, no doubt about it. You need to have guts. You need to have vision. And sometimes you need to have a strong stomach and a thick skin. But that's not enough. You need to have a plan, a map of where you're going and what it will take to get there. Then you need a commitment to that plan, including the ability to focus during times of adversity, chaos, and sometimes even boredom. Then you'll need to adjust to an ever-changing landscape and cultivate strong mentors that you can trust and confide in. Finally, you need to know how to finish and how to enlist support and rally support behind your causes in order to win. With that, we can take any questions you guys have about this or any other topics. Really greatly appreciate your time and attention. As a free gift, you can go to smartideation.com to download our guide to smart ideation. This is a 5-step process for screening your ideas to see if there, could be a valid, successful business idea. Smart ideation is the foundation of the plan, commit, win process. And if you want to increase and improve your chances of being a successful business and possibly even getting into the $100 million revenue club, start with smart ideation. Do we have any questions, Amanda?
What does the smart ideation guide look like exactly?
It's an 8-page guide. It goes through the 5 principles of smart ideation, which I also cover in my book, Plan, Commit, Win, 90 Days to Creating a Fundable Startup. And it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward guide that goes through those 5 steps that help you to determine if your idea makes business sense, good business sense. And by the way, just like I said with Entropic, we were faced with a lot of adversity and a lot of skeptics. You're going to get skeptics. You're going to get people that don't believe in what you're doing. What's important is you dig in and try to understand the market opportunity for what you're doing, what big problems it solves for customers, and that you think that there's a real solution out there that you can provide that's very different than other things that are available.
And why the real deal, what matters?
We don't want to limit ourselves to just talking about specific things like a startup school. We think that there's broader implications in the broader market environment. So when we initially came up with this as a topic for our blog, which then became our video blog, which is now becoming our live show, we want to be able to open things up to what are the really important things that matter in growing and building a business.
All right, sounds great. That's all the questions we have right now. So we will take any other questions throughout the week, and then next week we'll be on live again.
Yeah, so tomorrow, as Amanda mentioned, we're going to sign off for now. Next week, we actually are going to be talking about smart ideation. So if you haven't downloaded the guide and you want to just tune in next week, we'll be talking about that. Or if you have downloaded the guide and have questions that's a great time to tune in and bring your questions about specific things that you're curious about, how it relates to your business, or just things that relate to the guide itself. So again, this is Patrick Henry, CEO of QuestFusion, with the Real Deal What Matters Live, signing off. Thanks again for tuning in today.